70 million acres of wide open possibilities. Nevada is untouched. A place where the desert comes to life, the ground holds the history, and nature perseveres.
There is a waterfall nearby.
That's right. Eagle Falls is just behind us.
I crossed the California border for a place like no other, Emerald Bay.
Why landscapes?
I don't know. It speaks to me.
I see a landscape become a piece of art at the hands of Phyllis Schafer.
The sculpture is a monument to our ancestors.
In Reno, I explore the Basque influence in Nevada.
So my family's been continually farming in Nevada since 1854, which is 10 years before it was even considered a state.
And I try some Nevada-made whiskey in Fallon.
Pretty spectacular, isn't it? Nevada's like that.
I'm John Burke. Join me as I explore the 7th largest state in the nation, here on Outdoor Nevada.
I'm back at Emerald Bay State Park for unparalleled beauty, history, and nature at its very best. Come on, let's go have some fun.
A Viking castle complete with its own island tea house and waterfalls in the backyard? We're back at one of the jewels of Lake Tahoe, Emerald Bay.
Jennifer, how are you?
Hi, John. Nice to meet you.
Nice seeing you. What a beautiful day, right?
It sure is. We lucked out on the weather today for sure.
Well, let's talk about this beauty that's behind us. Lake Tahoe and Emerald Bay, they're connected, right?
Yeah, they sure are. Emerald Bay is a glacially carved bay that's connected to Lake Tahoe. This is a state park that was given to the state or sold to the state, I should say, in 1953.
And what about the water source for Lake Tahoe? Where's it coming from? Where's it going?
Well, we have 63 streams that come into Lake Tahoe, and most of those are snowmelt. They come from the mountains surrounding us. So the snow melt, as it melts, it filters through the granite, and the result is amazingly clear water.
Although Tahoe's world-famous water clarity has declined somewhat in modern times, on an average day, you can still see about 70 feet down.
What is the temperature generally speaking?
Well, the constant temperature when you go down, any distance below Lake Tahoe is about 39 degrees. So that's a winter temperature. The surface right now is in the low 50s. A nice warm summer swimming temperature would be in the high 60s at the surface.
And you go scuba diving here.
I sure do.
And that must be kind of chilly, but what do you see when you're down there, particularly in Emerald Bay?
Well, in Emerald Bay, as part of the dive team, one of our duties is to monitor the state of some sunken vessels. In fact, there is a dive location on the south shore of Emerald Bay. It's a couple of sunken barges. And those were like the cargo ships of their day, taking supplies all around before there was a road here. So scuba divers can learn about how things were back then.
Emerald Bay became an underwater state park in 1994, so the barges are protected and remain in pristine condition.
I see a structure out there on the island. Just give me a little hint as to what that is.
Yeah, that's the tea house, or the remnants of the tea house. Now, the tea house was connected to what some people call the castle, Vikingsholm Castle. During the summer months, when folks were living at the castle, occasionally they'd go out to the island and have tea in their tea house.
Why not, right? You have your own island, you might as well put a tea house.
Might as well.
I say we take a closer look. What do you think?
Sounds great.
Let's go.
All right.
The tea house was burned down by vandals in the 1960s. Now, only the stone shell of the building remains. Across the way, you can see the main house, this magical Nordic castle.
This is Vikingsholm. This was built by Mrs. Laura Knight over 1928 and 1929, and it's right on the shores of Emerald Bay. It's inspired by Scandinavian architecture. When they traveled to Scandinavia, she got inspiration for the design. In fact, Emerald Bay reminded her of the fjord she saw there, and that's why she named it Vikingsholm.
Who was she? Because obviously she had access to money.
Yeah, Mrs. Knight was, she was a single woman when she built this, which was kind of unusual for that area, but she had been married in the past. She was widowed once and divorced once, and she had various holdings and businesses of the time that was very successful.
Did she live here alone?
She had a lot of guests that would join her for the summer. Now you have to remember, in Lake Tahoe, half the year is covered by snow and inaccessible. Certainly in 1928 through the 30s, it would be more or less inaccessible for much of the winter. So this was a summer home.
Mrs. Knight had a staff of about 15 people on the premises in the high season. A lone caretaker and his family lived on the grounds during the remaining months, while Mrs. Knight returned to her main home in Santa Barbara.
And you know what I like about your story is that this wasn't an individual that was a recluse. This was somebody that was social, philanthropic, invited people out.
She certainly was, yeah. She was well known for her generosity. In fact, she would often pay the college tuition of her employees' children.
How long did she own it?
She owned it from the time that she built it until her death in 1945.
9 years after Mrs. Knight's death, California bought the property and turned it into a state park.
This is beautiful, and there is a waterfall nearby.
That's right. Eagle Falls is just behind us. A lot of times you can hear it roaring when we're down here. It's been a really wet winter, so we still have plenty of water flowing in Eagle Falls right now.
Lower Eagle Falls is a two-tiered waterfall. The upper section is about 60 feet high. The lower section features an even more impressive 90-foot cascade of water.
Absolutely gorgeous. Of all the things to do in Emerald Bay, what's your #1 favorite activity?
For me personally, I think getting out on a kayak is one of my favorite things to do out there. It's a completely different perspective being out on the water, looking up at the mountains around us. People can kayak out to the island and hike up to the tea house that we saw too. A great way to spend a day.
You and I think alike, but I'm going to add one.
What's that?
Meeting you. This has been just a blast. Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Likewise, John. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
Lower Eagle Falls, Fannette Island, and Vikingsholm. Just some of the reasons why Emerald Bay is one of the gems of Lake Tahoe and a must-see in the Great Basin.
When you come to the top of Eagle Falls, you're rewarded with a world-class view of Emerald Bay.
With a lifetime love of the outdoors, Phyllis Schafer memorializes landscapes into art pieces. For the past 10 years, she finds inspiration at Lake Tahoe, where she takes all that natural beauty and adds her own fantastical spin.
All right, tough question right off the bat. When did you know you were an artist?
Oh, that goes back a long ways. I grew up in a family that loved making things, so that was just part of normal life. Then I think it was in school, in high school, with a really great art program. I found that drawing and painting was my thing, and that was it.
And you specialize in landscape. Did you spend a lot of time outdoors as a kid?
Yeah, I grew up in upstate New York in a small town. My grandparents are both farmers, so I think the land is part of my DNA. And here I am in Lake Tahoe, which is all about gorgeous landscape. So I think it's just something that has perpetuated and been part of me for a long time.
What's one of your favorite spots in this area to go to?
Ooh, I think I'd have to say Hope Valley, which is where I'm going to take you today.
Awesome, because I want to spend a day in the life of you. I want to see how this works.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Sounds good.
Phyllis gets her gear and we head south on 88, over the California border to Hope Valley.
Well, geez, Phyllis, could you take us to somewhere ugly? This is gorgeous
I know,
area.
right? And I live here.
How many paintings do you have going at any one time?
I have quite a few. I probably have about 10 paintings back in my studio in various stages of completion. And so I'll come out here and work on this for the morning. I might have another painting in my car, take a lunch break, and then have an afternoon scene. So I'll work about 3 hours before the light has changed so much that I want to move on to something else.
So if the light is completely different from one day to the next, you're just working on a different piece.
Yeah, or a different part of the painting. Like, I tend to work in the background because that's most influenced by the light. Then I might, when the light changes and I'm still want to stay here and paint, I might focus on some sort of minutiae here in the foreground, and that's not as dependent on sort of what the light quality is.
Each painting requires an average of 8 to 10 sessions before they get the final touches in Phyllis's cozy studio. Between a full-time teaching job at Lake Tahoe Community College and all the places Phyllis wants to paint, there isn't much time for creative leisure.
Why landscapes?
I don't know, it speaks to me, and I just am I know I'm in the right place when I'm doing this. And there's something about the oil paint, color and value and saturation and all that, that I can get on to the deeper things for me of what this is about.
When you say deeper place, what do you mean?
I'm responding to the sensations. And the way I record that says something about who I am. There's a lot of movement in my painting. There's something about the movement of the earth, the fact that nothing is still, that everything is sort of commingling and working together in a very non-romantic way. I mean, things die, things are born. I think it gives me peace of mind about who we are, what our journey is, where we're going. Am I asking people to think that when they look at my paintings? No, I want them to be open enough that you bring your own set of stories to them. I'm lucky in that I get a lot of feedback about my paintings because I show quite regularly.
Phyllis is represented by the Stremmel Gallery in Reno, where she has a solo exhibition every 2 years. Her artwork has also been featured in shows and collections across California and, of course, Nevada.
How do you put a price on that, though?
You know what? In a weird way, my paintings to me are priceless, or I'll give it to you. I can't figure out a monetary value. That's why I have a gallery dealer.
This is amazing, what you've been able to do just with that brush and that paint. To change it like that, just every stroke just changes it. It's amazing. How do you know when you're done? Because that looks like you could stop if you wanted to.
Yeah, and I could, and a lot of painters would stop at this, and it would be a very loose, expressionistic style, and many artists really like that look, and I do too, sort of, but it's just not there yet for me.
Somewhere, there's somebody, and they're painting by numbers, and they're gonna run into one of your paintings, and they're gonna just catch on fire. What advice do you have to them?
Find a good teacher, someone that you really connect with, someone that can teach you how to paint. And get good materials and keep at it. Just keep doing it.
Phyllis, this has been a dream. Thank you so much for spending the day with me.
Thank you, John.
See you up the road.
When we go out into nature, we try to find ways to make a memory out of our favorite scenes. Some snap a picture. I just try to take it all in. But it's very special when you meet someone who has a whole process and point of view. Someone who can turn all of this into something more.
I gotta tell you, it's one thing to be in one of the most beautiful landscapes on the planet, but it also helps when someone like Phyllis comes along and can capture it and provide that experience for others forevermore. It's very curious. A lot of times when I'm traveling around the back roads of Nevada, I'll come across something Basque. A lot of time it's a restaurant. And I've always wondered, what's that doing here? Well, today, I'm at the University of Nevada, Reno to brush up on my Basque Studies.
Generations ago, a people brought their culture, their cuisine, and their sheep to Nevada. Thanks to some dedicated scholars and descendants, the Basque way of life remains alive and well.
Bill, what a pleasure to see you today. Thanks for meeting me out here.
My pleasure.
Now, the Basque culture, as it relates to the United States, goes back how far?
It goes back to Columbus's first voyage, if you want, which was the Santa Maria was built in the Basque shipyard, and a lot of the exploration of the California coast and all the way up to Alaska was conducted by Basque seafarers. Some of those guys started sheep operations, and they started roaming about what were public lands.
The Basque sheepherders roamed the ranges, just them, their flock, their trusty dogs, and maybe a mule. And some literally left their mark on the land.
While on the summer ranges, the herders were oftentimes up in country with aspen groves, and they would draw an image or a message in the bark, and then as the tree grew, that scar would produce the image. And basically they were doing it to pass time. I mean, they would by themselves. They were constantly fighting boredom and fighting, essentially insanity.
Anthropologists call these carvings arborglyphs, and some date back to the early 1900s. The aspen carvings could be just the sheepherder's name, or much more.
He might do one of his farm house back in the old country, or it could be pornographic.
Now this center, we could call this world famous, couldn't we?
Yeah, the book collection, I think it's about 45,000 volumes and thousands of photographs and memorabilia and journals. So scholars come from Latin America, they come from Europe, they come from throughout the United States to use these books.
This vast collection is critical to keeping the Basque culture alive, especially since the Basque don't have a homeland in Europe. The traditional territory straddles both France and Spain.
What are your hopes and dreams for this center going forward?
I would like to see this place continue to contribute to Basque American cultural heritage to the extent that we continue to underpin Basque identity throughout the United States. And so the future of this place is also in the hands of Basque Americans who haven't been born yet.
Bill, you've done your part and your passion lives on. Thank you very much for your time today. I really do appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Following in Bill's footsteps and leading the Center for Basque Studies into its next chapter is Javier Iruo.
Tell me a little bit about your family and your roots, if you would, where you're from.
I'm Basque, but I come from a family that has been exiled 6 times in 5 generations. So we are all over the world. And that is because of the European, political instability in the last 200 years. Too many dictatorships, the last one being the Reich, the Nazi Reich. So my grandparents indeed escaped from Europe to come to the Americas for freedom and safety.
Tell me more about the Basque culture. What's it like?
Well, I guess that the Basque culture is very dense. That's the first characteristic. People are very much together, like a family. Everyone is secure in the sense that there is always someone backing that person. And then, of course, culinary arts is an important part of the culture.
And Basque people tend to live a good, full life, don't they?
Yeah. Basque women are one of the longest living human groups in the world.
Really? The Basque, really? What's the average age of the Basque woman?
It is 87.
87.
And it is growing 4 months per year. That means that the young Basque lady today is not going to die.
In the heart of Reno, Rancho San Rafael holds the national monument to the Basque Sheepherder. The sheepherder and his lamb have stood here in homage to the Basque people since 1989.
The sculpture is a monument to our ancestors, the ones who came here, pioneering Basque migration to Nevada, and they had a harsh life. They worked very hard for their children not to be sheep herders anymore, and this monument is a way of saying thank you to them.
And you knew the artist?
Yeah, the artist of this sculpture is Nestor Basterrechea, and his family went to exile with my family on the same boat that was stopped in the middle of the Atlantic by a German U-boat and almost sank. But they got, in the end, the Americas, the land of freedom.
What do you see as the future of the Basque culture in Nevada?
Well, I think it has a great future. It has a great past and a great future. I think that the Basques in Nevada are now completely melted in this society, but looking to the homeland at the same time, so trying to enrich this territory with their cultural traditions, what can be called the invisible pack. Let's say the traditions, the elements that make up that what we call Basque culture.
You talk about family and friendships in your culture. I hope that you consider me part of that conversation. Thank you so much for meeting me out here today. I appreciate it.
Thank you to you. Yeah.
One of the oldest languages in the world and the oldest living language in Europe, Basque, or Euskara, teaches resilience and the power of tradition. The Basque have enriched Nevada, not only with sheep's wool, but also with culture.
Where would Nevada be without the Basque culture? And where would the Basque culture be without Nevada? The word is less. This is the National Monument of the Basque Sheepherders. It's a list of people who have fought for and continue to fight for the health and the vibrancy of the Basque culture in America and all across Nevada, also that we can enjoy it and experience it today. Today, I'm just outside of Fallon at the absolutely glorious Frey Ranch. Now, this is a family whose farming practices have gone back before Nevada was even a state. And And you ought to see what they're up to now.
Since its founding in 1896, Fallon has always been an agricultural town, and the Freys have been a big part of its rich farming history.
Hey, Colby, nice to see you.
Thank you for coming.
Are you kidding, man? This is like heaven. This is so beautiful here.
Thank you.
Tell me about your family and the state of Nevada.
Yeah, so my family's been continually farming in Nevada since 1854, which is 10 years before it was even considered a state.
And you always knew that you wanted to be here and work this?
Yeah, ever since I was a little kid, I loved playing in the dirt and in the toy box, you know, and my dirt and toy box just got bigger with bigger toys and a bigger sandbox here.
And Colby's sandbox is big indeed. The Frey Ranch farms over 2,500 acres of crops.
What is being grown here? What are you doing here?
We grow a lot of wheat, rye, barley, and corn, which is the main ingredients in whiskey.
And so that's what you're up to here.
Yep, so we make a lot of whiskey.
A lot of whiskey. You also make wine. You have grapes here as well, right?
Yes. Before the distillery, we had the winery, and we were making all of the wine in the winery and watching all the grains that we were harvesting at the same time, going to the dairy next door and saying, why aren't we making something out of this? It's the perfect grain for whiskey, and we're in the perfect atmosphere and the perfect soil and everything else. So we got our distilling license in 2006, and we've been legally distilling in the state of Nevada since 2006.
Colby, you and I think alike, man. You're my kind of guy. I want to take a closer look. Can we go in?
Absolutely, let's go.
Forget farm to table. The Freys are operating a farm-to-bottle bourbon operation here. I can't wait to see it in action.
Okay, Colby, take me through the science of this, from the field to the glass. What happens?
Yeah, so first of all, we're farmers. We always tell everybody we're farmers first. We want to do whatever it takes to get the best quality grains. So then we harvest the grains, we store it, we mill the grains, then we bring it into the mash cooker and we actually cook the grains. Grain has a lot of starch. And starch is a long sugar molecule, so by cooking the grains, we actually break the starch into fermentable sugars.
Once the grains are ready, it's off to the still. But this is no hokey moonshine operation. Colby worked with engineers in Kentucky to custom design a mechanical masterpiece.
So this still is one of a kind. It was made by Vendome Copper and Brass. But what's neat about it is it's a continuous still and it's a pot still. What we can do with this is we can strip everything in the continuous still and then re-distill it in the pot still so that we get the best of both worlds. We can do a lot of quantity, but we can do good quality also.
And to Colby, the science of distillation crosses over into the poetic.
Distillation, the way that it works is the alcohol begins to boil. That boiling alcohol, it turns into an alcohol vapor. We collect that vapor by condensing it back into a liquid, and that's the spirit. So that's one thing, it's kind of neat, is that's, in my opinion, why they call them spirits. You're actually boiling out the alcohol from your main product. You're taking the spirit out and you're collecting the main part of it.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. What about aging?
So aging, we age all of our whiskey in barrels. Any clear alcohol is unaged, so we bottle it immediately. Any brown alcohol gets its color from the barrels. So it's whiskey is crystal clear until it goes in the barrels, and it gets its color and a lot of its flavor from the wood.
A warehouse filled with whiskey? Now that sounds like a barrel of fun.
You know, I thought outside was beautiful. I had no idea what was waiting for me in here. This is amazing.
Doesn't it smell good too?
Oh, that's just it. It smells so rich, so good. How many barrels do you have here?
So there's 1,160 full-size 53-gallon whiskey barrels in this room.
Containing what?
So mostly bourbon, but we got a little bit of rye whiskey, we got oat whiskey, we got wheat whiskey, single malt whiskey, quad malt whiskey, Scotch style whiskey, we got all kinds of whiskey, but mostly bourbon.
With its temperature extremes, the Nevada climate is perfect for the aging process, as the bourbon is constantly moving inside the barrels.
And these are aging. That's what's happening here?
Yep, so they're all aging right now, and what happens is these barrels are charred on the inside. And when they're charred, that creates carbon, and carbon acts as a natural filter. So what's happening is as this whiskey's going through the seasons, it's expanding and contracting inside the barrel, pushing it through that charcoal and carbon layer, extracting the impurities, and then giving it the color and the flavor from the oak.
That is fascinating. And in terms of the weather conditions in here, you like it going through the seasons, but also humidity is an issue.
The only thing that we add in here is humidity, because we want that wood to stay swollen up. If we don't, it could dry out, and then that's called the angel shares, what evaporates out of the wood.
Tell me more about the requirements of something being a bourbon. There's a few benchmarks.
There's 5 requirements for bourbon. The biggest one is it has to be 51% or more corn. It has to be distilled to no more than 160 proof, has to be put in the barrel at no more than 125 proof, has to be put in a new American oak barrel. The only other one has to be made in the United States.
So bourbon really is the quintessential American liquor. And the Frey's bourbon isn't just American-made, it's Nevadan-made.
Here's to you, brother.
Cheers.
That is perfect.
Thank you.
I have to tell you something. With your spirit, your entrepreneurial spirit, you obviously care about the people that work here. You obviously care about your family. You care about your product. You're making Nevada proud, and I really appreciate you taking me around today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming. I really appreciate you.
You got it.
Support for Outdoor Nevada comes from Jaguar Land Rover Las Vegas and Jaguar Land Rover Reno, inspiring the spirit of adventure with confidence in any terrain or conditions. Information at jlrlv.com or jlrreno.com.